5.1, minutes of the Lake Taupo Protection Project Joint Committee meeting on the 11th of March 2019. Any clarification of those minutes? Okay, could I have a mover for those minutes? Thank you, Councillor John, seconded by Councillor Williamson. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Item 5.2, the naming of public road, Charnley Garden Subdivision. 5.2, just in the nick of time, eh? Good afternoon, Darren. How are you?
Pretty well, yeah, and yourself?
Yes, good, thank you. Oh, yeah, just the red button, thanks very much.
Red button?
A blue button, but it goes red. Sorry.
Check. Right, so I'm sure you've all had a good read. Any questions?
Yeah. Yes, we've got about 22 listed here.
Oh, I look forward to it.
No, any questions, councillors, of this particular naming of this road that approved it says in the report that's been approved by all parties concerned. So, Councillor Jollins?
Look, thank you, Your Worship. It's just a comment from me, Darren, and it's from some of the residents down that road. They were very complimentary of how easy it was to work with council to get this road fested. So they just wanted to extend their thanks and patience.
That's great, thank you.
You can pass that on to your team. Cool. Any other questions or queries? Okay, suggested resolution there that we name this road. Could I have a move, please? Moved by Councillor Boddy, seconded by Councillor Hickling. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? 5.3, new public road names down at Whariwaka.
Thank you.
Louise. So we have
New roads,
Louise Wood, Senior Planner. Good afternoon, Louise.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yep, as Darren said, hope you've all read the report.
Yeah.
It's two new roads up at Whariwaka East subdivision on the left-hand side of the Lake Terrace as you're heading out to the airport. And they're just slowly progressing with the development, and as each stage they move forward, they need to come up with new road names every time, so hence why I'm here.
Good news.
Any questions?
Down at Whariwaka. Not
Down?
Up. Not up.
Up?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's right. Just checking. Yep, no, okay, thanks, Louise. Any questions and queries of Louise? Pretty straightforward. So that's in that the first subdivision out there, is it? Which one is it on the left-hand side?
Yeah, so if you're heading out towards the airport, on the left.
On the left.
It's developed quite a bit already. There's loads
No,
of
ratou.
houses. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
ratou, yeah,
So
sure.
they're just progressing southward, basically.
Okay, lovely. All right, there's a suggested resolution there that we approve the following road names of Tawhai, Crescent, and Kaunihera.
Kaunihera.
Place. All right, do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor Park. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Right, 5.4, approval to consult on the draft water supply strategy. Tanya. Good afternoon, Tanya.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So as you're well aware, we have done some work on developing a strategy for our drinking water supplies, looking out 30 years. So we've gone out and spoken to some key stakeholders, and we have developed the draft, and we're ready to go out and speak to our wider community. If we get approval today to go out and consult, looking at consulting from the 13th of May to the 13th of June, and we'll find out what the thoughts are of our community.
Lovely. Thank you, Tanya. Any questions of Tanya regarding the water strategy? Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not really a question. Back in February the 1st last year, 2018, prior to the long-term plan, we went out and consulted in regards of a water treatment plant at Acacia Bay, or should they hook on to the supply from the Taupo Township. The way the figures were written, it was very, very clear that the persons in Acacia Bay were going to hook up with the supply here because it's going to be cheaper. But since then, I can't remember, it was in 2050 discussions, but we've been mooting the fact that maybe, like some of our sewage, we should all have the same charge for water. If that had been the case prior to that decision being made, we may well have found that the Acacia Bay would be, as I've argued in this chamber, for security of supply. If anything happens to the two pipes that go across the river and the bridge, that whole area is out of water, plus the whole of Hooker Falls Road and Waireki Village. I'm just wondering, and I know there'll probably be a no, whether we should not look at that again, looking 30, 40, 50 years out.
Okay, Tanya, is that a question for you?
So just to clarify your question, is that in relation to ensuring resilience rather than the funding component?
It's what we as a local government are required with, and it's called security of supply. By doing that, we guarantee a large tract of land security of supply in an adverse event.
So certainly resilience is an important consideration looking out 30 years. So in the implementation plan, which is one of our actions, you know, our water asset managers will consider resilience, but I'll let Mr. Strongman.
Yep, so sorry, through the chair. We looked quite hard at it when the decision was made, and there was a lot of robust discussion around that. There's certainly a lot of resilience in the preferred option, which is to pump from town, because of the resilience within the new within the Taupo Lake Terrace water supply plant, and also we do have alternatives with other reservoirs planned to provide more resilience for those areas that you mentioned.
Thank you, Your Worship. So effectively what you're saying is, where is the water going to come from if it's from the Taupo treatment plant to the Acacia Bay side of the lake, if the pipes go down?
So through the chair, it's what we're saying here is it's probably easier to make it bulletproof for the two pieces of pipe that we have across the river than all of the pieces of pipe in other areas coming up from a plant, say in Acacia Bay as such. So what we have done is we've looked at it as a whole, as a catchment, as a network, and we've looked at the resilience of that, and we feel it's probably better to be where it is placed currently, which is the way to bring it back into town and feed from Lake Terrace.
And did we not debate that at the time? Yeah, quite extensively. So, but
My real question, Your Worship, was the fact that we were debating it then on the fact that each water treatment plant would have a different yearly cost. Now that may well change.
Right. Okay. So under this proposed water strategy here, Tanya, is there an opportunity for submissions to come in regarding that, or that decision's been made? Decision's been made. Okay. Cool. All right.
I remember, Your Worship, one of the officers of council, when I raised an issue, once said that things change. I'm making the point things have changed.
So through the chair also, we're concentrating on resilience here. There's another question around water quality and delivery of that. It's far better to have that in one place that is really well understood than multiple plants.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on this water strategy? Dare I say, do meters get covered in this strategy? No?
No, we one of the focuses of the strategy is, as a council, being a responsible user of water, but there's, excuse me, there are lots of other water conservation measures we can look at first before we touch on water meters.
Okay, cool. Good answer. All right,
But there is quite a drop. Is it 400 litres per person at the moment per day? And we're looking to have it by 2028, is it, down to 200 and something?
Yes, that's correct. And one of the challenges for the Taupo district is that a lot of the other districts, it's based on the usually resident population. We have some challenges in that we don't adequately know how many people are here all the time. So one of the pieces of work that will roll out of this strategy is doing some work to get a better handle on what our summertime and peak populations are, so that we can adequately calculate that per person water usage.
okay. Thank you, Tanya. Any other questions of Tanya? No, straightforward. Okay, suggested recommendation there that council approves the draft water supply strategy, 2019 draft water supply strategy implementation plan to go out for public consultation. Very good. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor John, seconded by Councillor Hickling. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Right. 5.5, approval to consult on the draft road encroachment policy. Tanya.
Okay, so we have developed a draft road encroachment policy to look at the major types of encroachments we experience of our road reserve. So looking to go out for consultation at the same time as the draft water supply strategy, so from the 13th of May to the 13th of June, so we can find out from the community what their thoughts are on the draft policy.
Okay, any queries on the proposed policy there? No? Councillor Park.
Yep, just through the chair, I've had a lot, especially over the last couple of weekends, of complaints around real estate signs on intersections and blocking line of sight. Will that, do you think, this is the right this is the right process for people who have issues with that to submit?
Yes, that's certainly not an issue that I'm aware of, but yeah, if it's on our road reserve, then that's something that could be covered by the policy.
So this doesn't cover the footpaths and that sort of thing, does it? It's just road?
So the road reserve.
Yeah, so the whole, so when you got trees going onto the footpath, that's the vegetation policy, is it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, cool. And bollards? This is in here? Yep,
Yes.
cool. All right, so
So we've got to cover the footpaths with eateries and things like that are covered as well.
yes, true, yeah, cool. Okay, no other questions for Tanya? Suggested a resolution there. That we approve the draft road encroachment policy to go out for public consultation as well. Moved by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Kingy. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against? Carried. Thank you, Tanya. Right, local government, 5.6, local government leaders climate change declaration. Alan.
Thank you, through the chair. We had a workshop on this on the 2nd of April, so I won't go through it line by line.
Yep.
I'll just take it as read.
Yep.
There seemed to be a feeling at the workshop that was in favour of becoming signatory to this. We pulled the paper together and you'll see the recommendation is to become a signatory to the Local Government Leaders Climate Change Declaration.
Okay, so that's confirming the signing of this document. Yep, cool. Thank you, Alan. Any queries or questions on this particular item? No? Councillor Boddy? Yeah. Councillor Jollins?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just interested to know if we do sign this declaration, we talk about a proactive response. When and how are we going to frame up what that proactive response is? How do we think that'll play out?
I would suggest that our next long-term plan, that it forms part of that. There's differing opinions, of course, as to what you can actually do as a local government in the climate change area. As the paper refers to, there's looking at direction from central government as to their involvement, so not just sitting solely in the hands of local government, but I see it as part of the structure of the next long-term plan.
And I guess that would extend to us looking to ensure that we have our house in order too, and efficiencies or whatever we might be able to achieve here.
Correct. Yes.
Councillor Boddy?
Thank you.
Chairman, I will be voting against this based on the fact that if you read the document that we were given what local government may or may not be required to do, and I took particular interest in the letter I received from, where are we now, the Taupo Forest and Bird Committee, if you look what they're expecting us to do, we're doing that already. By putting our signature on a document that may come back against this in regards if there's an increase in ratepayers having to pay for an activity which should be central government's, I'm very reluctant to put my name to it. So I use my right understanding orders 8.7 to abstain, but fully support the direction that these papers are asking us to look at. But I found it also interesting at the last meeting I raised the question that I'd been trying to speak to the Ministry of the Environment. Well, I finally got a letter back, and I find it quite fascinating that one of my concerns was electric car batteries and solar panels, but this letter from the Ministry state that as solar panels can last 25 to 30 years, we have a significant window of time to develop more effective use and recycling solutions. What I'm trying to say is that 50, 60, 70 years ago, the environment was totally different than what it is now. In 50 years, 40 years or 30 years, what's that environment going to be if we're faced with recycling contaminated materials that we're now using to save the world? I don't know, but I'm very, very reluctant to put my signature on this document.
Okay, sorry. Councillor Stewart?
With solar panels, Councillor Body, the life expectancy isn't 30 years. The capacity is to 25 to 30 years. They will operate at optimum. After that, they might decrease by about 5%, but they will still be working. And I fully support this and encourage my other district councillors to do the same. I think that for our youth and our rangatahi in our rohi and the tamariki, then we have got to show leadership and show them that we do care about their environment that they're going to inherit. And I would like to move that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Before that seconder comes in, my comments in regards of how long these last was actually based on the letter I've got in front of me from the Ministry of the Environment that actually states panels can last upward to 25 to 30 years before needing to be broken down.
Good. All right. Being moved by Councillor Stewart. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kingy, thank you. Anyone else like to speak against the motion? No? All right. I'll put that recommendation there. All those in favour, please say aye. It's against? Yeah, would you like a division? Just recorded Councillor J. Body against. Right, motion is carried. Thank you. 5.7, review of draft statements of intent. Jessica Simpson.
Good
Hello,
afternoon.
Jess.
Hi. I'll take the item as read. It's fairly mechanical. Is there anything, does any of the councillors have any questions?
Any questions of Jess? 5.7. 99, all pretty straight.
Not today.
I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor Johns.
Good reading on us. Good reading on a Sunday night, eh? All right. Okay. You've got a pretty lightly today, haven't you, Jess?
Pardon?
Surely there's some queries here, but no.
I'm sure
You're
there will
lucky.
be soon.
Okay. All right. The recommendation there that council makes the following feedback to the CCO's draft. That's listed there. Although, could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Jollins, seconded by Councillor Truman. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. Changes to WLAS governance arrangements. Jess, this your subject too?
Yes, Gareth is going to speak to this.
Okay, 5.8. Gareth.
Yes, I am.
That was the deal.
So I have intimated this to you before. So this is one of your shared service CCOs that you're part of. You're part of two. This one in the Waikato and one in the Bay of Plenty. All councils in the Waikato are a shareholder in the Waikato LAS. What the directors, which is currently the chief executives of each of those councils, are recommending to each council is that we change the governance structure of the LAS. Essentially, we've decided or recommending that having each chief executive as the directors is not the most efficient or effective way of running the LAS. So the proposal was that we appoint a independent chairperson, who obviously would need to be remunerated accordingly, which incidentally is the same as the current arrangements that you have in place in the Bay of Plenty. The difference from the Bay of Plenty is that the other directors would be representative of geographical areas. So the proposal was one from the Regional Council, one from Hamilton City Council being the biggest authority in the region, and then one from the north, east and the southern parts of the district. So the end result of that is reducing the size of the board down to be representative of the region. The proposal is that I'm the southern representative on that board, and the whole purpose of this is to be able to have the board undertake better work, if you like, in terms of shared services across the region, or opportunities for shared services, that each council can then decide on a case-by-case basis whether or not it makes sense for them to buy into that piece of work. So it really is an attempt to move it away from chief executives sitting there fighting their corner for their councils, to looking at shared services and then the councils deciding whether or not it makes sense for them to buy into that service. There is a small additional cost to that, obviously, if you're remunerating directors, but divided by the councils involved, it's a minuscule increase in the costs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Any questions of Mr. Green? Councillor Jollins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question from me. The paper outlines that there are some risks associated with this change. I did read their documentation, but the risks weren't overtly clear. Are you able to outline what those are, or what the significant ones are, please?
So the biggest risk, I guess, is that your company, which you own, goes off on a tangent and develops products and incurs costs which nobody wishes to purchase. Now that's been mitigated through a shareholder forum, so every quarter the shareholding councils will get together and essentially direct the company in terms of, or direct the directors in terms of where the company should be heading. So if you take it into a model that we all know and love, the Fonterra model, it's like having a board, which is the Fonterra board, but then the shareholders forums, which the individual owners are getting together and directing on a regular basis of what's happening. So that would be the biggest risk that I can see.
Thank you, Councillor Jollins. Any other questions or queries of Mr. Green? Okay. Suggested recommendation there, 1 and 2. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Jollins. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Right. 5.9, Minister's consent to grant licence to For Nature. Item 5.9, Mr. Nathan Murray. Good afternoon, Nathan.
Good afternoon, thank you. Yeah, at the previous Fred committee meeting, that committee, acting under delegation on behalf of council, approved a licence for the flowline activity at Hipapatoa Reeds Farm Reserve. The second part of that process is for the full council, acting under delegations from the Minister of Conservation, to review that decision made by Fred, acting on behalf of council, just to make sure that it was arrived at accordingly. So that's what we're asking you to do today.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Murray. No doubt there'll be some questions here. Any questions of Mr. Murray? No, but just wait a couple of minutes just to gather our thoughts. So the submitters, obviously the nearby neighbours, appear to me have quite a few issues with this particular project. I've listed a few here: safety of the trees, noise, traffic compliance, and regards to the management plan. So how do we handle those particular queries?
So I don't know if it's presumptuous to ask the members of the Fred committee to explain how they perceive that. Well, there was a lot of discussion during the committee. It may be better for members of that committee to answer those questions on behalf of the committee.
Sure. So perhaps if I go to the chairman first, is that okay, Mr. Chair, of that committee, as to as to those particular queries I have, anyway.
Yes, Your Worship. There's quite a lot of discussion. A number of concerns, and there's been obviously a number of emails since the FRED committee from some of the residents with similar concerns. I think the main concerns from a landowner point of view is obviously the trees, because the fly line is connected to the trees in some way. The other issues are obviously the from the residents' point of view is some of the noise. The other issues are the reserve management plan and the requirements of that reserve management plan. We have a legal opinion that it's classified as recreation reserve. This activity is of a recreational nature, and our legal opinion is that the reserve management plan doesn't require any amendments. So, in other words, it's consistent with the reserve management plan. Now, you know, there's another opinion that says it's not consistent with the management plan, but our legal opinion is what the committee decided on at the time. You'll see in the report, I think I just have to find the page. Just give me a second. I've highlighted this during the summing up of this application. I'll find it in a minute. I'm just going through all the submissions. But the members of the committee, including myself, expressed concerns about the safety, the insurance indemnities, and the concerns. Those concerns would be covered by the conditions of the final license to occupy in the document. And Your Worship, I think when we come to the resolution that we need to include a statement in that resolution, and I'll come to that at a later point when it's been discussed with the other councillors.
Okay. All right. Okay, so
If I may, through the
sure.
chair, I had advice earlier this morning from Mr. Fox that he's spoken to our insurance providers and they have recommended minimum amounts of cover for insurance to be included in any licence. I believe they're $5 million public liability and $1 million statutory insurance.
Okay. All right. Any other questions and queries of Mr. Murray?
Through the chair, I have a
Councillor Jollins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for you, Mr. Murray. Reading through the documentation that formed part of the FRED committee and also our papers before us today, I would like to understand how, as a council and the officers, can say that this activity complies with the Reserve Management Act for this reserve, but at the same time say that this activity was not provided for or considered when that plan was put together. I'm having trouble reconciling that. Can you take me through that?
So there are two parts to that question which need to be considered. Is it in conformity with the management plan, and has it been anticipated by the management plan? We believe that it is in conformity with the management plan and that it does not contradict aspects in the management plan, but it has not been anticipated by the management plan as a specific activity. If it had been anticipated, there would have been no need for us to carry out public consultation. So while it doesn't contradict any rules, it's not explicitly catered for, which is why we need to go through the public consultation and the council and committee process to make sure that you approve of the activity in that space, even though it does not contradict the legislation and planning requirements of that space. So it's more of, we're asking you as landowners if you think it's a good idea, not whether it's legally permissible. I hope that somewhat makes some sense.
Look, to be honest, the lens I'm putting over this is not whether, in principle, I think it's a great idea. I'm looking at it as a landowner and my statutory obligations as being responsible for this Reserve Management Act, which is a commitment that we made with the community. So that's the lens I'm putting over this, not whether this is a great idea. I think we've got that round the wrong way.
If I can just clarify, I don't think that's what Mr. Mori was saying. I think he was quite clearly saying that the activity wasn't foreseen by the management plan, so it's not specifically provided like what now Taupo Bungee is. So on that site, in that management plan, it says there will be a bungee platform on this location, so it's not specifically provided, no debate about that, but there's nothing, his advice is that there's nothing in the management plan that precludes it from you approving it. So it's not saying is it a good or a bad idea, it's saying that the management plan doesn't stop you from approving this if you so wish.
Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. Just trying to following up on Nathan's commentary regarding something that conforms to a reserve management plan under the Reserves Act, with in this case it's recreation, similar to, say, the Tongariro Reserve Management Plan, where there's activities and, for example, the market goes on that hadn't been contemplated before, but it still conforms to the Reserve Management Plan. This is just a similar example.
Yeah, precisely. There's no way when we're writing a management plan that we can anticipate every possible activity that can come to us. So we write it in a way that there are general principles that are things which are acceptable, completely acceptable and completely unacceptable, and anything which is in the middle is where we make these sorts of decisions. And I believe that this is an activity which is one of those ones that is in the middle. It's not explicitly not allowed for, and it's not explicitly allowed for.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions and queries? Councillor Body.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering that when you gave us right at the end of that meeting this list, which is also in the agenda papers, I find it rather interesting that there's more NAs than there are A's. If I look at it, I'll try and work through these as quickly as I can. The first one is values in the Reserve Management Plan are not respected, and then you talk about fly line meets many of the community recreational values. Can you explain the activities that don't meet that and why not? So if you're accepting the fly line meets the community recreational values, not all activities will be able to meet those all values. So what would those other activities be?
I think what I was saying, or attempting to say, forgive me if I haven't expressed myself properly in the report, is that the activity is not capable of meeting all of the values associated with the management plan, but many activities that we have on reserves cannot meet all of the values, regardless. Take, for example, the Lakefront Reserve. You have many activities on Lakefront Reserve which could not possibly meet all of the values of that reserve, but they meet many of them.
So that may, to my way of thinking, should have probably been an A. Does not reflect the concept plan within the RM Reserve Management Plan. Where doesn't the concept plan identify the location for a fly line activity?
So that the concept plan, while it is part of the management plan, is, I can't remember the exact words that I put in the previous report, but I did go over that, and it does not, it's not an exact representation of what will go there. It's where possible and where it can be achieved.
In the submissions, there was comment made about inadequate information on the activities, and the comment made here, but it's difficult to provide a fully realised proposal when there has been no landowner approval to justify further expenditure. Now, I find that interesting because if a person was going to forward with a concept plan of something, there's a cost to that person to do that. For some reason, this applicant hasn't been asked to do the things that we need to find out before we can make a proper decision.
All right. Any other?
Well, I've got a few more, if I may.
Yep.
As the one that voted against it. The applicant has not proven that the activity will not adversely affect the values of the reserve. This is a matter of personal evaluation and interpretation. It's got an NA, but I would accept, if it's a personal evaluation, the fact that those that submitted made that comment would be just as valid as those that didn't. Number 6 will restrict freedom of entry and access. This proposal could in fact open up more of the reserve to the public use. I wrote down here, what does intent and purposes and accessibility mean under section 54D?
So when you license or lease an area to somebody under the Reserves Act under section 54, the accessibility of the reserve is not, that part of the Reserves Act does not apply.
Yeah. Well, here is another one that the submitters made about the camping area B will be lost. And the comment made is it is anticipated that the applicant will ensure that there is sufficient parking. We haven't seen that yet. I would have thought that that would have been something that the applicant would have put forward at that time, because they have also missed out in regards of the cost of undertaking those activities. No permanent or semi-permanent structure will be permitted. And the comment made is this policy is specifically associated with camping, not the wider management of the reserve. I went through the policy because there's only a few lines that states policy, and I couldn't see anything that mentioned outside of camping. So I'm just wondering how that assumption was made.
I read the Reserve Management Plan where that is specifically associated with camping, not with any other activity.
Yeah, thank you. And then just finally, in the submissions, there was a submission from Opus in regards of trees, which seems to have been ignored in the decision that that was made. But I have two other things of more concern, is the fact that on the 28th of February meeting, the applicant gave us an arborist report as to the safety of those trees. That arborist has now backed off from that report, and what he has stated is, and this is to one of the persons that made submissions, who has actually said about the arborist report based on 2 classifications for the use of ropes on trees. But what I find interesting that the arborist has said, you are correct. My letter dated 25th of February 19 is neither tree assessment or an arborist assessment. My initial inspection report was a brief walkthrough with Alex, less than 1 hour on site, and an initial comment on the trees. Again, my comments as an arborist, not as an engineer. I did give Alex a prize for an arborist assessment at that time, but he did not take up my offer. So I am concerned that as the Fred Committee was given information that was incorrect. But the thing that has really, really, really got me angry is a comment made, and the name was given during the consultation process, of a councillor ringing one of those objectors to say you could get something worse. But more importantly was the meeting they had on site, I think back in March, where the CEO of Enterprise Great Lake Taupo made comments along the regards, you could get, not the worst, you could get something worse. But I've got it on tape, because the whole of that meeting was videoed and recorded with the permission of those that were there. And I'm really, really angry that scare tactics were used by saying to these submitters, well, if you don't take this, you may get something else. I find that appalling.
Councillor Park?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I've read all the submissions, and I'd like to thank all those affected parties who have sent emails over the last week, and I apologise for not personally replying to them all, but they have been read. I just want to reiterate some comment that someone made to me earlier about perhaps going forward, because it has been a bit mucky, I have to say, from a process perspective around perhaps when it comes to these sort of licenses to occupy, that perhaps they could be done streamlined with the resource consent process. I don't know, because there are a lot of unknowns, and until you actually as a landowner say, okay, go away and have a look at it and go through the processes and then come back for final sign off, we don't know what we don't know, which is why I voted for the fly line, along with any other project that might want to invest a lot of money in Taupo, being allowed the opportunity to go through the technical processes. While I understand some of councillors' bodies' concerns, I am not an arborist, I am not an RMA specialist, and I fully respect Joe's report, the RMA consultant that the neighbours or some of the residents employed. And because of those technical issues, I believe it is only fair that this flyline project, like any other, like the Bungee did 20 years ago, or any other project, get to go through those processes. So I mean, he might get to the building consent stage and it might fall over. It might get to financial. We just don't know. But I don't think it's fair without those technical reports and that knowledge around car parking, mitigating noise, adverse effects, and all those different constraints of the RMA or RMP or whatever else might come into play. So therefore, I would still recommend that we allow this to take its course and see where it goes, because I don't think we can make that technical decision on behalf of the Minister.
Okay.
Yeah, Your Worship. Yeah.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I, just having on that Fred's committee, had made that initial decision to forward at this meeting. Just endorse Councillor Park's comments regarding the process. Obviously, we're not the experts, but obviously, it did go to that stage of approving the license to occupy. There's a fair way to go with resource consents, as you mentioned, with mitigating building consents, whatever, to obtain approval. And I also, once again, I also commend, thank you very much to all the read all the submissions through, and some very, very good ones, and they were much appreciated.
Councillor Hickling.
Yes, Your Worship. I would have liked to have recommended that we set some conditions today in terms of the terms of the licence. But I think now I'd prefer to wait until the total process has gone through either resource consent, building consents, and for this item to come back to full council or the Fred committee, whichever, with a list of conditions that we can set into the licence or lease to occupy this site. I think it's a little bit early days yet. We certainly know that there's parameters around the safety of the trees. There's no question of that. And for me, I think each tree needs to be assessed and have a certification or whatever. And obviously there's other engineering conditions as well, car parking, the actual access into the site. So I, like Councillor Park, prepared to progress this through, but for it to come back to council to make that final decision on the conditions of the licence, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other
yes, just a couple of questions from me. Thank you, Mr. Morey. In terms of the reserve's location, if we're starting to talk about resource consents, that's rural land, isn't it? Okay, so there are different provisions under the district plan for rural land as you would look at residential land, which is completely different. Okay. So My understanding reading through this plan is because of its unique nature and location that the reserve management plan was crafted in such a way that any adverse effects, and I think I'll quote here, and a high weight is given to this too, that we need to consider the effect of activities and any adverse effects on the reserve, its primary purpose and its neighbours. This is our statutory requirement prior to giving any lease or agreement. So to go around and say, right, we'll resolve some of these issues through the resource consent process, I think is, I'm trying to find the right words here, is not living up to our duties and our obligations under the Reserve Management Act. I fully appreciate the officer's stance on this particular reserve management plan, but having read Joanna Lewis's document, I would have to concur with her findings. I don't believe that this activity in its current format meets the intent and purpose or the policies of that Reserve Management Act, particularly in regards to the adverse effects. We don't know really what those adverse effects are, which is why we're starting to talk around in circles and we can't come up with conditions. The onus should be on the applicant to provide that information before we make a decision. The Reserve Management Act, we have statutory obligations and we can't defer those to further down the food chain, I'm sorry. If we are of a mind to want to approve this, then I think you have to go back and have a look at the Reserve Management Plan and make amends that way. From a personal point of view, I'm fully supportive of a fly line and ecotourism in the area. What I am concerned about, and Councillor Park alluded to this earlier, if we don't get the process right now, it's not a matter of we'll learn for next time, we will open ourselves up for the risk of legal challenge and the reputational risk that comes along with that. And when we're a community that says we've got the door open for tourism, to have a big bump in the road over something like this is not a good look. And I'd just like to refer you to a comment that was made by the General Manager of DGLT this morning, and she talked about tourism and infrastructure and the sustainability and looking at the future. And part of that is developing, sorry, I'm losing my voice, developing tourism opportunities that work in with the community and their aspirations. The Reserve Management Plan was put together to deliver on the aspirations of the community. I think it sends a dangerous precedent to just roller coaster over it and defer it. So for that point, I'm sadly going to have to vote against this.
Okay, any other questions and queries?
Just to follow that up, because I'm a little bit like Councillor Jollins, I'm fully in favour of a fly line. I voted for the zip line that didn't go ahead. But what really swung me at the Fred meeting was Joanna Lewis's submission, which was excellent. And if I could just read a couple of lines out. If the proposal is pursued, then the Reserve Management Plan, including the concept plan, should be reviewed to enable wider public engagement about commercial, that's the word, commercial tourism activities located on the reserve, and that could be any reserve. Indeed, that is what the HAMP itself explains is the appropriate course of action when it states Taranaki Taupo District Council will not permit any activity or development contrary to the policies contained in this management plan, and that's policy 6.5.12, and any significant change of objectives and policies will require a plan review as per the processes set out in section 41 of the Reserve Act 1977.
Right. Any other points you want to make, Nathan, at all? Pretty well traversed this afternoon, so I just want to ask a couple of things. So I go back to my 4 points earlier, and Barry's touched on them too. So as far as the safety of the trees are concerned, these will be assessed by qualified people at the appropriate time, correct? Yep. Noise obviously is another concern from a lot of submitters. That will be taken into account with all resource consent.
Yeah, if I may elaborate, one of the points that I made to the Fred committee was that as the landowner, you are not bound by the minimum standards. You can make any provision that you want when you're crafting the licence. So if you feel that you want stricter conditions, you're allowed to ask for those, which I believe is cool. What Councillor Hickling would like to review further on if you do proceed past this step.
Yeah, sure. And the site is actually zoned rural,
Yes.
correct? Yeah. So there are no traffic rules as far as the plan, but obviously you'll take the environment into consideration. So traffic movements and all that sort of thing are not restricted in that area?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Obviously we've traversed the Reserve Management Act and the plan. I suppose my mind does go back to Taupo Bungee, which I was involved with, and I'm just thinking of the huge upside to that operation. It's created a huge opportunity to go down the river and all that sort of thing. But that's just a side thing. And you know, obviously the Fred Committee heard all the submissions, consumed all those submissions. So that's been covered. I'll probably defer back to the chairman of Fred now to perhaps if he'd like to look at the recommendation and suggest any amendments that that you may have. Councillor Hickling.
Just before we do that, Your Worship, I'd just like to take the opportunity again, because the two previous speakers have made comments regarding the management plan. So Nathan, and I did ask this question, and I need to ask it again. In your professional opinion, this application fits in with the present reserve management plan, and there'll be no legal complications or whatever you'd like to call them if we make this final recommendation to council.
And I may like to invite Nigel or Ella to speak on the legal
Please
ramifications.
do.
But
We
my
need to
professional opinion under the Reserves Act and the Reserve Management Plan is that this is in compliance with both. Joanne Lewis is a very, very, very good planner.
Yes, she's
a
She's
resource
been in Taupo a long
management.
time.
She's a resource management Act specialist, not a Reserves Act specialist.
Okay.
So sometimes you get Reserves Act, Resource Management Act specialists which have that specific lens where everything is very black and white and effects based. The Reserves Act and Reserve Management Plans, being much more local, are a little bit more fluid, although they are written down in stone. So again, I don't want to get into a planning competition.
No.
Because Joanne is a very, very
when we
good
go
planner.
to court, there's
So
defence against and for,
Yep.
and it comes down to an opinion. But Nigel, please.
Probably not a very straightforward answer.
I know.
Look,
nothing is when it's in the law. But
I can't sit here and say that any decision you make, whatever decision you make as the minister today, is going to be immune from challenge. That's an impossible thing. Yeah. What you have today is you've had advice, professional advice from your senior reserves planner as to the answer to your question about whether the proposed activity is contemplated by and in conformity with the reserve management plan. So you've had that advice. The Fred Committee had that advice. The Fred Committee also received the submission from Joanne Lewis on behalf of the submitters. So the Fred Committee had in front of it all the information it needed to make the decision it made as administrator of the reserve. That's now come before the council, wearing its hat as the minister, to make a decision about whether it consents to the granting of the licence. So all I can say is you've had the advice, your professional advice from your expert planner. It's over to the council to now make a decision. I can't go any further than that in terms of the chances of challenge or what that might look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nigel.
So,
right.
with that clarification, Your Worship, I would like, as chairman of the Fred Committee, I would like to recommend this resolution on the board there, but I would like to add something at the bottom, if we can move it up, to the to the points of the terms of the licence to be referred back to full council. Number 4, yeah. For final approval, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Well, no. That has to happen anyway, or a building consent and stuff like that. Hopefully.
I guess what you need at that point is enough information for any of the concerns or questions to be answered. So you'd be expecting detailed site plans and things like that, hours of operation, things like that.
But we no need to list those in the report. That they should come through this. Yeah.
Okay, so you're happy to move that amended recommendation?
I would happy to move that to you, Your Worship. Yes.
Okay. All right. Councillor Hickling has moved that recommendation. Would anyone like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Williamson. Would anyone like to talk against that recommendation?
Chairman, I'm not talking against it. I just have the question was raised with me by a person that's now in Australia today, and it was to do with Maori engagement. Did that take place? Because the report doesn't state those views. I know there's areas of that reserve that are more important to Maori than some, but were they met and consulted with?
No, not specifically in association with this proposal. We did rely on the recently completed within the last 2 years cultural impact assessment, which was done alongside the reserve management plan, but not specifically in association with this activity.
Your Worship, is that good or bad?
I'm not prepared to answer that. I think Mr. Murray has answered in the way that obviously went for a cultural impact assessment. How long ago? Yeah, 2 years ago, was it?
Yeah, it was within the last 2 years. It was underway, I think, when I...
Your Worship, this is a total...
Just over 2 years ago.
This is a total new entity wanting to go into a reserve that's commercial. It's not what we did in 2017. It's totally different.
Okay. All right.
Can I just speak?
So you're not talking against it, just another point of clarification? Yeah, sure. But you said you weren't talking against it. No, I'm not talking for it either. Okay, you're right. Right. Okay, Councillor Jollins.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to say one final comment against this motion. And an old mentor said this to me many years ago when I first got into local government. If you find yourself needing to make a decision and you're uncomfortable about making that decision, then you should really reconsider or stop for a moment. If something feels wrong, it's because it possibly is. So I don't want to get any more into a who said, he said legal thing, but if you're feeling uncomfortable about a lack of information, which I believe you and I believe there is a dearth of that there, you don't have a lot of information here to make this decision, I would urge you not to.
All right. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, are you speaking against?
No.
No.
Can
Okay.
I say something?
Yeah, sure. So, anyone else want to speak against the recommendation? Suggested recommendation, Councillor Kingi.
Thank you, Your Worship. My position on it is I would rather know those terms before we're approving. It does seem that with number 3, I know there's a process to come after this, but I'd rather know what I'm committing myself to, and to approve a licence on number 3 and then come back and say then we want the terms to come back. It does seem to be a bit around the wrong way. So I prefer to have that. I am in support of these sorts of ventures, but I would just prefer to know what I'm committing us to. So,
cool.
Yep.
All right. Anyone else like to speak against it? Right, speakers for the amended recommendation.
Yes, I acknowledge obviously all the various concerns from local residents and fellow councillors, and I've got some reservations as well, but I believe that we need to be open to this sort of venture and at least go down the track and find out more, make sure everything is done correctly. I mean, I'd also like to know that information, but we are not committing ourselves to anything more other than going to the next stage. Am I right?
Correct. Well, obviously it's got to go through the resource consent.
I don't see
Tell
why you
me
couldn't,
what the next steps are, please.
I don't see why you couldn't add something to part 3 which said subject to negotiation of an acceptable licence agreement. And then that licence agreement will come back to you guys for approval. At that stage you could still turn it down, I believe.
So could we add that to, I'll just talk to the mover here. Yep. Yep. So what are you suggesting, Nathan, that the terms of the licence to occupy be referred back to council?
I just, if you did want to give yourself some extra cover to make sure that you are explaining yourselves in the way that you want to be, that you want it to be, that you could add on to number 3, subject to the approval of negotiation of a mutually acceptable licence or something along those lines, which is what we typically put in a recommendation, but we just don't come back to the committees or council with those mutually acceptable licences, because that has been delegated to the chief executive in most cases.
Okay, so Shaney's added it to 3, subject to negotiation of an acceptable licence agreement. Yeah. Yep. Mutually.
Wanted to say who it was acceptable to.
Yeah. Well, mutually covers everyone.
Yeah, I would believe so.
Okay, good work.
That's 4, isn't it? That's 4 is who it's going to be.
Okay. All right, so add that to 4. Sorry, Shane.
If I was playing devil's advocate, I would say that number 4 means that it comes back, and if you didn't approve, that you still have approved the licence.
Yeah.
That was my only concern. If you stuck with number 3 as it existed.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. That's right.
I think you could probably take. You could
turn the speaker on.
You could put 4, join it up to 3, so that it's and that it comes back to council. So it's subject to, and it shows that it's coming back to council to make that decision.
But you are effectively approving the licence, correct?
Subject to.
Yeah. In this case, I believe that if you couldn't come to mutually acceptable terms, you could knock the process on the head.
That's right.
As was
if somebody wouldn't come
written,
back because you wouldn't negotiate, you wouldn't have negotiated.
As it was
those.
previously written, I believe that you could look at that and say that you have approved the licence, but you are committing to coming up with a mutually acceptable licence. You couldn't actually back out of approving the licence.
So this is you saying in principle, yes, subject to all of those things being negotiated in good faith and getting to an outcome that you, councillors, are then happy with.
Just playing devil's advocate again, though, I thought that's what we did a month ago.
Have the speaker on. Any other councillors? Okay, Councillor Hickling, it's been moved and seconded by Councillor Williamson, the amended recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? And would you like that recorded? Yeah. Sure. So, Councillors for, you've got that, Shani? And Councillor against, Councillor John Boddy, Councillor Roseanne Jollins. Anyone else? And Councillor Tonganui Kingi. The recommendation is carried. Right, 5.6. Item number 6. Is it? Sorry. 5.10. Sorry. Should have this on computer, shouldn't I? Get it over here. Minister's consent to grant easement to Unison on Lyland Drive out at Kinloch. Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. We are asking you to exercise the same delegation as the previous item, but hopefully in a more straightforward manner. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, apologies. Sorry.
Right. Okay, any questions of Nathan?
Through you, the chair, I have a couple of questions. Sorry, Mr. Morey, you weren't getting away so quickly on this one. This consent to grant an easement to Unison is in relation to the Seven Oaks development?
Yes.
And servicing that?
Yes.
Okay. So these services that will be required, will they need to go through the Akaya stream and over the potential development that has yet to be approved by WRC?
I'm not aware. They only asked us for the easement over the reserve. I'm not aware of the wider route of the electrical services.
The reason I bring this one up, and this paper is actually silent on this matter came to Fred in about October, November last year, and I asked you to please defer making a decision on it subject to the consents going through WRC for Seven Oaks. Those consents have still not been approved or decision made on the notification through WRC, so I don't think that situation has changed, and I'm surprised to see this here in front of Fred again.
Yeah, my apologies if I misunderstood. I thought that you were asking for it to wait until it went through council's consent process, which I believe which it has been approved. So, my apologies on that one.
And to clarify, you are right. There are two regulatory authorities here, TDC and WRC, and that's why I asked the question about the stream and how these services will be getting to Seven Oaks. But I would prefer if we tabled this one until we know what's happening.
So, any councillors?
I was just going to remind the council that it had been through the Fred committee earlier, and it had been deferred until the resource consent was approved. So, yep, I wasn't aware that it.
So I guess to clarify, there's two consent processes. It did wait for the district council consent process. It's the regional council crossing that hasn't yet been approved, is my understanding. So there's two different consent processes there to think about. You could leave this on the table and come back at a later date. I'm not aware of the implications of that for Unison and what that would mean for them. The other alternative is that you could approve it today, and of course it will only ever be given effect to should the crossing point be done. So don't mind which one of those two you do. It's either either. Because the same result would occur, that it wouldn't happen unless that was approved.
Yeah.
I guess I was just urging caution back in November because there were some sensitivities about the notification process for this resource consent and didn't want to see that there was any predetermined decisions being made. But if you can work your way through that, Mr. Green.
So the resource consent has now been granted? Through the TDC? Yeah, but that's just over the... Yeah.
District Council resource consent has been granted. Apparently regional consent approval is not.
And what's their consent for over the stream? So it's yeah, okay. So can't we just approve this subject to that coming through or something? Or yeah, well, surely power is a commodity that is so important. So this could delay things quite considerably. But I'll take my advice from the Fred committee.
There is a possibility also that they could go in the road reserve and they would not require any council approval at all because they have automatic rights.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that was the downside if we didn't sort of approve it.
So this is actually where we want it?
Yes.
Yeah.
This will be a better outcome. There isn't as much room in the road reserve as there is in the actual reserve.
Right.
Itself.
Okay. So
can we put a
suggestion,
Gareth,
Mr.
can
Green?
we put something to do with receiving the consent from regional council or?
I just want to check, Scott, is the regional council consent not issued yet? It's not, okay. So
No, I note that, but then the note from Unison is in particular regard to Seven Oaks.
Is subject to.
So you could under recommendation 1 put subject to approval.
Final approval.
Final approval from Waikato Regional.
Council.
Well, from Waikato Regional.
Valley Authority.
From the Waikato Regional Council's resource consent for the Okaia stream crossing being approved.
Is that all right? Yeah. It sounds like it's probably not far away anyway. Hopefully. All right.
So
very good.
Where have we got that now? Okay.
Shane, is it a busy day?
So recommendation 1, I think, Tina, at the end of that one. So you're approving it subject to.
That's just receiving.
Just receiving.
Maybe it's under 2, but when you go instrument conditions with following easement terms are inserted and subject to.
I have to say our resolutions are getting longer and longer.
Nothing worse than someone watching you type something and they don't say anything.
Is that what we wanted, Gareth? Will that cover it?
That'll do what you're looking for.
Will that cover it?
Whether it's in the right place or not doesn't matter really.
The intent is clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Do I have a mover, please, for that?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Hickling, seconded by Councillor Williamson. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Right. Okay. 5.11.
So, Mr. Chairman, just briefly, in terms of the covering report, there's obviously been a lot happening through the month of March. Just one or two things that I'll highlight there. The first paragraph in terms of the long-term plan amendments, you will be obviously all receiving the email updates at the end of each week in terms of the number of submissions coming in. Quite pleasing to see them flowing in quite heavily now, and it'll be obviously interesting in the next little while to as we finish that consultation process to see where we end up. The second point there, obviously, the appointment of Andy Hemmer into that role in Turangi is quite an exciting thing. That has meant that Mr. Hemmer has also had to stand down from the chair of the Turangi-Tongariro Community Board, unfortunately. However, he's now up and running as a staff member and starting to add some real value already down in Turangi in terms of he's currently working through all of the outstanding service requests and the like for Turangi and trying to get on top of those. The other point which I would add to that point is that you're aware that at the public meeting that we had in Turangi some 2 months ago, we undertook to get back to that community and with an additional public meeting in April. We're currently just working on to set a date for that meeting, and we want to have PricewaterhouseCoopers, who you approved a couple of council meetings ago to undertake the review. Want to have them having completed that review and be present at that meeting to be able to report back to the community about those questions. So we're just trying to confirm that, and then we will confirm a date for that meeting and work with you between now and then to look at what and how we're going to present to that meeting. And the only other point I would make is the Local Government Commission obviously heard and made decisions on the number of seats around this table. We will now have an additional seat after the election. That's all well and good. I guess the one thing I would want to acknowledge there is I put a little wager on with His Worship that wouldn't happen, and I lost it, so I am still yet to pay that, but we'll do, Your Worship.
Just ordering from the merchant now.
Very good. So well done to Council and to the Mayor for that win through the process. But unless there's any questions there, I'll leave it to Alan to start walking through the report.
Yep. Councillor Kingi.
Yeah, thank you for that. Your Worship, just my question is just in regards to that second paragraph, and in particular, and thanks Gareth for just clarifying, around the need to report back to the Turangi community. But I just want to get my head around I guess, how we are going to manage that approach and what role the community board will play in it. I know that when we met with the Turangi community, we gave the community an undertaking that we would look into these requests, come back with some suggestions, and I know there's been a zillion emails, and I appreciate that. But one of the things I just really want to make sure is that we are given enough time as governance to work with the board so that when we are going back to the community, there is a collective approach and that we're all on the same page, or at least have got some thinking, because I think, the feeling in town is still one of don't know where things are at, don't know where things are going. And I know that the TAG group is communicating, but generally for the Turangi folk, there are a whole lot of assumptions being made. So I guess if I could just signal, we've really got to be very careful, I think, in the way that we plan to meet with the Turangi community, and then particularly how to address some of those concerns that we all sat there and acknowledged and made comments to the I guess to the point that we would try to find solutions. So if I could just raise that as a flag in regards to that point, Your Worship.
So through Mr. Mayor, I totally understand and agree with that. I think immediately following that meeting, council sat in an informal state and the board was invited to that. A couple of board members did attend and talk through the different issues. From that, officers have been in the last 6 weeks working on each of those issues that were raised and finding more information out. So it'll be in the next couple of weeks that we'll be in a place that we can start to work with council and then the board around the 4 or 5 different points that were raised at the public meeting, coming to essentially a response to each one. You asked for this is what we can do, this is what we're proposing to do, community. So I totally agree with you that before we get to that public meeting, council needs to have brought in or discussed and debated and agreed to what each of those are, and also have worked with the community board on those, definitely.
Just through the chair and in support of Councillor Kingy's comments, because we all stood up at that public meeting and put our hands on our heart and said to the community, we've got this. Governance, we're all over this, we will look at what we can do for you. We're only a couple of weeks out from coming back to the community, so I'd really like to see, Gareth, if we could have a workshop sooner rather than later, because I think we as governance need to give you a steer too on those issues and what our thinking is in preparation for that meeting, which is coming up very quickly. And to Tong's point, I think we need to involve the community board in that discussion as well. So I'd really like to see a workshop soon, please.
That's what you just said.
We certainly are going to need to have a workshop. We can set another one up. At the moment, we're working on the basis of the discussion that we previously had, but we can certainly set another workshop up now and work through that.
We'll see if we can do that. So we can do that with Tina? Yeah, okay. So you want a workshop? A workshop, and then agree on
So the workshop would be around reconfirming what you discussed immediately following that public meeting in terms of what you're going to do on each of those points, and more importantly around therefore how are you going to present that back at the public meeting, and then those officers will obviously go away and prepare that for you, and then we'll go back to the meeting and away we go.
So we set a date for the meeting?
Not yet, because we're still waiting for confirmation of when PwC will be able to have an outcome of the work that they're doing. So I want to present that back at the same time.
Okay, so Tong mentioned that the community is thirsty for finding out what's happening.
Yep.
So after that workshop, we could possibly do a press release to announce the date of the meeting. To announce the date of the meeting.
Yep.
And just that needs to get out there. Just aiming for the 24th or.
So the date I'd like to get out even earlier than that. And I've asked Mr. Fox's meeting with PwC on Friday. So we're really hopeful that as a result of that, we'll be able to set a date for the meeting anyway, which puts us under pressure as well. Makes us have to actually do this piece of work. But we did commit, as you say, to come back to the community in April. So I'm pretty determined to do that.
May.
May. May, sorry. May.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, yeah, so soon, yeah, so possibly on Friday or after Friday we could relay that, get that date out there so people can aim for that date, yeah. So we all know, yeah. All right, Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I just want to reiterate that we did all take that very seriously, and from there we all went down and visited. I spent several hours one day with Kevin and Gareth and Tong and various other people, and we made lists of things that needed to be done. My understanding is that they are being worked through. Be good to have an update actually on that. But there is a plan. So I would have thought that you involved in Turangi would be passing that on to the people that need to know, and make sure you're all playing your part. So it's not, we are doing something, you know, like we are taking it seriously and trying to get some action. So I just like that noted.
So we'll definitely bring an update on all of those items that we talked about. A lot of them were pretty small operational ones, so we'll bring up a list, an update of where they're at, and they have all been worked on, as well as obviously the conversation with you around those 4 or 5 points that were raised, you know, the higher level things which we need to work through.
Yeah, just on that point, when Mr. Cousins from the TAG group presented the community board, the list seemed to be a lot longer than what I'd originally thought. Had we covered the extra things, or?
We'll endeavour to make sure that they're consistent. There were some slight deviances and changes. From what the public meeting talked about.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Not deviances, differences.
Deviations.
Deviations.
Just quickly, regards to that list, is that what Andy is supposed to be partly doing, or what's his role?
No, so Andy's role, yes and no. So Andy's role and Mr. Hemmer's role on an ongoing basis is essentially being the conduit between the community and council. So it's been the local voice and local face. So when an issue comes up, be it a broken curb or footpath, that when it's coming to council to get resolution, he's there banging the drum internally to make sure that it is happening and happening in good time, and then conversely, if things can't happen for whatever reason, then he's communicating that back with the community. So yes, at this point, one of his tasks will be to help us in this process with this list, but his position is more enduring than that.
So Your Worship,
Right. Councillor Hickling.
I suppose we're waiting for the Price Waterhouse report before we discuss the $2 million that they wanted to
20
million.
20 million. So that again, you'll remember that was one of the requests was the 20 million, and that is one of the things that you've already spoken about, the issues about how to do that. But let's leave that again for the workshop that we have with the board and yourselves to work through.
And, you know, let's not forget, this isn't just a list of things that the community asked us. This is about how we're going to work together moving forward. We need to make sure we're clear on how we're going to do that.
Very good. Okay, anything else to add, Mr. Green? No? Okay, Alan. Finances.
Yes, through the chair. It's been quite a dynamic year, actually. When we look at it from a financial perspective, there's a lot of positives and negatives. The positives probably in the regulatory area and in the venues. The negative is related to a lot of the unbudgeted expenditure. If we look at Waiora House, we look at the Arrowsmith wastewater and numerous other elements. So as a result of that, you're seeing pluses and minuses right through the financial accounts. The positive, I suppose, is that we're still forecasting to finish the year pretty much in line with what we originally budgeted. So from a Treasury perspective, our borrowings are in line with what we forecast. Probably the level of capital expenditure is not as high as we originally thought it would be, but that's really picking up in the last quarter of the year. But from a Treasury perspective, we are delivering budgeted investment income. We've realised a lot of equity investments, and irrespective of the pluses and minuses that have occurred, from a financial perspective, we're still on track to deliver and maintain the financial stability that this council has. So I'll pass it on to my colleagues to talk about each of their particular areas.
Okay, thanks very much. Any questions of Alan?
While you're there, the 30 million that's now being paid back, how did that pan out? We borrowed 30, so what were the pluses and minuses?
We made about 115,000 arbitrage. It's crazy where you borrow money and put it on term deposit and make money, whereas anyone who goes out to get a term deposit knows what the interest rates are like at the moment, which are next to nothing.
Effectively, we borrowed 30 million to pay 30 million.
We borrowed 30 million in advance of a loan funding coming up for renewal, and so we did it in advance, and for that particular period, which was from September or October through to March, the arbitrage of the interest earned versus the interest paid was a positive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Williamson, sorry.
It's just a comment. Alan, notwithstanding the challenges, I just congratulate you and the team on your stewardship and the finances of the District Council.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Alan. Okay, democracy and planning.
That's me. So really not much change from the last month. Just one more take on the projects which Gareth's alluded to in terms of the representation review. Happy to answer any questions.
Good. Okay. How are we going to fix the extra chair around here, Ken?
Doing some planning around that.
Oh, okay,
yes.
good.
Very valid concern.
Very much so. All right. Thank you, Tina. Now, what have we got? Community Services, Mr. Brian Fox.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Remind me to have a bet with you in the future, given Mr. Green's unsuccessful attempt. Councillors, on page 144, nice words there from Alan in terms of financial performance in the regulatory area, but we do have some challenges in OPEX still, and the team's working pretty hard in that space. I'd certainly like to commend Scott and Nigel particularly. I mentioned at the last meeting that legal costs are something that we are challenged with, and that will continue. However, in that space, if I look at it, in the explanation of variances in budget, you'll see at the bottom bullet point there, the mention of vested assets and 2 unimogs. Yes, plural. 2. There's 2. So that basically is a vested, I think the value there is showing as basically 50, 52, so 26k each. By my recollection, if I can get Mr. Connon to find another 8, I might be able to balance these books pretty well by the end of the year, so that's the challenge for him. Next page, there's a couple of comments there from me. You'll see that there's colours that I don't actually like in terms of KPIs, a red and an orange. But really some of these KPIs are what I would term blunt instruments, that if you miss 1%, then you're going to be red for the rest of the year. So I'd really like to have a look at those going forward, but acknowledge that response times are important to the community. I still think we're doing great work in that space. But yes, just to acknowledge that there are some areas there that we have to work on still.
Mr. Fox, are we getting more dog complaints? Or what's up?
Well, I think that in terms of these KPIs, you'll see there was a month when we had an issue, which was February. So there's resourcing issues around that. I do want to talk about that going forward as well. We have several hundred noise complaints, several hundred dog complaints. So when you have maybe less than a handful that put you out in a month, it doesn't take much to have that reflected in those targets. I don't think we're getting more complaints. I think there's a heavy demand still from talking to the team, and that team is primarily looking at their compliance officers, but it's pretty much focused on animal control, on dogs. Dogs barking, menacing dogs, wandering dogs. It can be a range of things, so it covers everything. I brought this to my attention of my colleagues in terms of compliance holistically across council, and so there's other areas of council where compliance is also a requirement, and we're going to be looking at that more closely in the new financial year. If I think of swimming pools, for example, and things like that. So this team is heavily focused on dogs, and obviously there's 2 parking enforcement people as well. But there's other areas of council that we need to be looking at, and so that'll be a focus going forward, and I've got the support of the Chief Executive and my colleagues at SLT for that to happen. So I'm grateful for that. Just also a thank you from the team. I'm focusing on this team just because of those KPIs, but previously there's been approval for body cameras to be bought and supplied to that team. They've had those in play for about 4 or 5 months now. We hope that would have a behavioural change in terms of the people they deal with, and the advice I've got, and Nigel behind me has been part of those meetings as well, is that it has had a positive impact in some difficult situations that they do encounter, and also that it also helps them focus on their professionalism when they're dealing with clients as well and customers. So a big thank you from them to you for that. I'll probably leave it at that, Your Worship, just for the time being. Happy to answer anything.
I'm going to give Mr Fox a suggestion on dog control. It's the Tongan Dog Control Bylaw. I'll tell you about it a little bit later, Brian.
I look forward to that, Councillor Body.
The Tongan. Community facilities. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Your Worship, Councillors, facilities was the issue about timing, around the grants and time frames that we have to fulfill those obligations in our wildlife duties. So you'll see in our, on the front page there, there's a little bit of an issue, but it's in terms of projects, we have our first tip. I have to say there's a tip on our second page, which is relatively heavy. That project has now been closed off, and you might have seen the media that saw and celebrated by the Minister's Award for Municipal Relations. So that was that project. From a strategy perspective, we have looked at city, we have staff partners in the plans. Those projects are continuing, some better than others. I'll leave it to your imagination around some of the issues we're facing around the city, and that's some of the relations with the leaseholder and their obligations to Office of Overseas Investments, but also internally within the community there remains some discourse around the process that we're forward. Council continues to support something, and from our perspective we still have a project which is a mighty beautiful thing, part of the review process for the management plans for the entire property, not just one. It's not just the campground.
I thought I had a big enough mouth. Sorry, Councillor Body. Right. Okay. Hello, Mr. Body. Hello. The other side of it too is that there are a couple of big publicly visible items. One is the AC Bards Hydro Slide. Thank you, Mrs. Jakes. The Hydro Slide is obviously a big ticket item that does have a lot of it. It will have a lot of attention from mainly the kids, but that work is underway, and you'll see there that it is getting ready to kick off properly in terms of the build items. The team have had it all fenced off and moving through. So that's all I had, Your Worship. Those were the bigger items, but certainly there's a good couple of chunks of work in there. Thanks, Dylan. Thank you. All good. Councillor Truman, just got a question for you.
Sorry. Just in regards to the spa pools at AC Bars, what's happening there?
I'd like you to turn around and look beyond the pole, please. Mrs. Jakes would be the best.
The other day.
So the spa pools are closed at the moment, just the maintenance of them as you know, they're due for a refurb this next financial year, so they're actually getting quite towards the end of their life, and we're just working on the plans which we hope to bring to you shortly so that we can have that project kicked off at the beginning of the financial year.
So not likely to reopen?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Councillor Body?
Just very quickly, the Turangi playground, that'll be completed by the end of May. Would that be correct? Well, it's been around a while.
I'll tell you, you're not supposed to tell him. We are still working through some issues around the Turangi, but we are having conversations actively with Ngāti Turangi Tukua around progressing planning. That doesn't mean that there's any contracts signed and or the developments that we'd hoped to be in, or the position that we'd hoped to be in at this stage of the year.
Very good, thank you, Dylan. Okay, water, Mr. Kevin Strongman.
Kia ora, everyone. First of all, there was a question by Councillor Body around Acacia Bay. I'll flick you everyone an email as an answer from Dennis Lewis. Apologies, we didn't get to that last meeting, but we provided quite a detailed response there, and Mr. Body, you can get back to me if you've got any more queries. Water, just on compliance, it's the same old there. We are working our way through the data problems that we are having on certain areas. That will take months rather than weeks to fix, to work our way through. Just want an update on the Taupo water treatment plant. You'll see there that a lot of that work is going to be on site from June. But we are thinking about completing that by August, which will be great. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, off-site at the moment, manufacturing of things, but it will all arrive in June. The only other thing to mention is Waitanui, and pretty much ready there to open it. We're just working our way through with the contractors about practical completion and getting sign off for everything. We've had Kevin Sayre's team on site looking after it for the last week or so, see if there's any issues with the handover. So we'll be looking at an opening there for the water supply in the next few weeks, I would have thought. Any other questions on water?
Very quick, what is a 224C sign off? Is that to do with?
That's your subdivisions. So
what's a 224C?
So
mean? It's
title. You get title.
Okay.
223 is the subdivision, and 224 is the title.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. What's next? Transport, Kev?
So transport, really, the main thing I'll mention is the northern access improvements, Control Gates Hill. Work and billboards will be going up this week for the work. We will start work on that early next week. There will be some signs going down and being put back up tomorrow because that speed restriction coming down the hill is 50 to 50k from 80 is tomorrow, the 1st of May. So they'll be going up tomorrow.
So where's that 50k start again? At the top?
Up the top. So currently where it's 80 as you head out of town.
It's going to be
it's coming 50k all the way up to the top.
Fodder for the boys, isn't it?
Yeah.
For a while.
Me, probably. Yeah. And on the northern access improvements, we've had a meeting with the contractor Higgins, and they will be starting at the top. So we're probably looking at 4 to 5 weeks up the top area at Poipi Road intersection. They will be doing a lot of work along the footpath as well at various times, widening the footpath to a shared path width. And then the last 5 weeks they'll be moving down to the Norman Smith Street area. We'll be putting a lot of comms out. There's a lot of effort going into that. It won't be just the people immediately around it. They'll be getting some, pretty much knocking on doors, pretty much of this specific comms package around what the work means for them. Particularly because the bulk of the work will be in after hours, so it'll be in the evening just to maintain the flows through the day for the majority of the users.
Yeah, if you can oversupply the comms, it'll be good. Oversupply.
I think that's the intent.
Knocking on doors is brilliant, you know,
Yeah.
so that sort of thing. You know, obviously it's a fairly touchy subject out there, so yeah, you can't over deliver.
I think we're going to try and over deliver. We still will get some results that are not great. It's just the way it is. But we're also meeting with the Kinloch residents prior to the Kinloch residents group meeting. We're doing the same with Acacia Bay residents when we can organise a meeting with them as well. So a fair bit of comms going into that. And we'd like to pick up this plan and if we do any learnings from this and apply this to Arrowsmith and Napier Road as well.
Yeah.
Because that's the
So,
next one.
so like the Kinloch residents, would it be, you know, would it take much longer going to the ETA? Down Link Road and go to the ETA, or I'm just thinking.
So I think during the day when the bulk of the flow is coming through,
Yep.
they're going to try and have that at 50k for most of the time.
Yep.
It's only those areas where they've actually got some work where they need to go down to 30k that it will be 30k.
Right.
So I think around is quite a long way around. I think the majority of people will still continue to go down the hill.
Yeah.
I think you're probably likely to get more slowing down, just changing from 80 to 50, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Rosie. Councillor Harvey, sorry.
That's quite all right. Just checking, which footpaths are being widened?
So as you go up, it's a shared path going up, control gates. It's probably about halfway up. It's quite wide
On
at
the
the moment.
right or the left?
On the right-hand side.
So that up from the bridge up there?
Yes, on the right-hand side. It goes about halfway up, it's wide, and then it's going to be widened all the way up to the lookout.
Oh, cool, because
Yeah.
I was asked about that, whether that was going to be widened.
Yes.
All right. Yep. Carry on. Yeah. Was that it?
I think that's it for
Wastewater?
yeah, for wastewater.
Sorry, transport.
We still, transport. I thought we had got to wastewater.
No, we're just
No,
going on to
That's right,
wastewater.
transport.
now.
One to wastewater. Got any
Oh.
questions? I'm happy to
Oh,
answer them.
it was in last month, I did bring it up. On page 160, it's got this amount of money released from Bowwave is not required in 1819. Is that the year, or is it a figure, or is it supposed to
That'll be year 1819.
Sorry?
That'll be the year, financial year.
1819,
Yeah.
okay.
Nothing else to point out in wastewater?
No, nothing. I'm just flicking through my notes. I think just again, Turangi, there's a lot of work happening down there, but the carbon dosing that we're trying to put in will deal with the majority of the formal warning component that we've got down there. We're still having discussions with Turangi-Tongariro around the pond work that we've got to do there. That's less of a concern for WRC as far as the formal warnings concerned. So we'll just work with Turangi-Tongariro around that.
Solid waste.
And I've got nothing extra to report on solid waste or stormwater unless there's anything.
Yeah, just while we're on the solid waste side, listen, me up from Rotorua, one of the contractors over there, they're still recycling 1 to 7 over there. Yeah, the contractor is still recycling 1 to 7. They've found a market for it. So I know what are we doing?
So through Chair, we're not doing one. We're only doing 1 and 2.
1 and 2, yeah. So
And if they've got a market for it, I'd love to know who that is.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll send the contractor's name to you. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we're not alone in doing 1 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just up the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was at pains to tell me. So
Right, okay.
So I'll put you on to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Solid waste. Everyone happy with the dump? Brilliant dump there. It's absolutely brilliant.
I'm glad Brent's not here to hear that. Yeah.
What's that?
I'm glad Brent's not here to hear that.
Half an hour about why it's not done.
Sorry. Is that the...
There's a couple of confidential items coming up, but you've heard some good stuff this morning, I think.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, John. No questions of John? All right. What else? We've done all that treasury management, haven't we? So, thank you, Mr. Green, and your team here this afternoon. Appreciate that. There's a resolution there. Recommendation. Information be received. Thank you very much. Could I have a move by Councillor Park, seconded by Councillor Kingy? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. 5.12 council engagements, May, and conference opportunities. Obviously, we need to put the workshop in there. Tina, did you find a date before?
So we do have the 7th of May already booked in your diaries for workshops. So we'll sort out a time for that, and we also potentially have a extraordinary meeting for Fred in terms of looking at the application for the e-scooters, sorry,
Cool.
on the 7th of May, potentially. So we're just working through the logistics of being able to get that to you. Sorry?
No, it's a new meeting.
It's a new one.
Yeah.
An additional meeting.
While it was in our diaries, I had 7th of May down for workshops. I tied up at 10:15, so I may be early and late. But
Okay. And does anyone want to go to Maramara Piaka on Friday the 31st of May? No? All right. If anyone wants to retrospectively go, let us know. Yes? Yep, I haven't seen that latest number. Madam Chu? So Madam Chu was the, Madam, yeah, we had the big evening out at Wairiki, didn't we? Yeah. Okay. So, so perhaps the councillors, because when do we have to RSVP? Oh, okay. Oh, 8th of May. Okay. Yeah. Does anyone?
You wish.
So perhaps it's been noted and retrospectively can we
Yeah, your worship.
Oh, yeah.
I may be up. I'm probably going to be up there those Wednesday and Thursday next week and
Okay.
anyway.
Yeah. Yes. I think yeah, there's a motel just south of the Bombay Hills there, $72 a night. It's quite good. No, that's all right. So possibly. Yeah.
Well, it's just one, is it? What committee go? How many?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's open. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. They did put a huge effort and they paid for everything that particular evening, and it was a very, very good evening. And the Belton Road, scenario. And we heard this morning from EGLT that it's still possible for international businesses to do business here. So I think seeing we have that connection there. Tina, how do we do it? So 3 possibly here. So. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so tentatively, Councillor Hickling, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Williamson. Cool. All right. And I'll leave you to deal with Corn as far as the RSVP is concerned. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Any other?
Oh, you wish I'd be quite interested in going to the Zone 2 meeting as well.
And
enjoy the other one, Gordon.
That would be great if you could, John. Thank you. Just up the road, so that's great. Lovely. Anything else? Right. All right. Okay. Suggested recommendation there. Approve. Moved by Councillor Hickling, seconded by Councillor Kingy. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Members' reports. Any tabled reports or any verbal reports? Councillor Boddy?
Firstly, I think 3 or 4 of us councillors went to the Shou Xing dinner the other night with Jackie. I was a little bit disappointed not many councillors turned up. My wife and I ended up at the table with 3 Japanese, 2 men and a lady. The lady didn't speak The lady didn't speak much English. The gentleman didn't. As the night went on, they spoke more to my wife than they did to me. But
That's understandable.
my wife's fluent in Mandarin. I'm not. The problem that we had was it was very, very hard to talk to. You know, if we'd had other councils there to sort of interact, it would have been a lot nicer. But more importantly, the day that the council went through the process of getting the new directors, I suppose, for Enterprise Destination Great Lake Taupo, I was at a meeting that was organised by Veronica King in regards of our age-friendly city status. And what I found interesting, that Veronica was able to get Dame Peggy Koopman-Boyden, who I think you know the family, Your Worship, to be the MC, if you like, of that meeting. I've got a list here of the things that Hamilton are doing when they were accredited, but one very interesting thing was that this council would not be age-friendly because we don't have any chairs with armrests. Now, just think about that. When you sit down in a chair when you're in senior years, often you need this to lift you up. So it was a fascinating day, and once Veronica has got her things together, we'll probably be coming back with a little bit more details, because there's a lot of things like putting more seats around town, having strollers and wheelchairs and gardens. I mean, it may be over the top, but that's what Hamilton's done, and they got the full support of the council. So other than that, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Through the chair.
Councillor Williamson.
It's not a particularly. It was an event. It was actually Colin Coburn's funeral last Friday, and he's a great advocate on council bodies. Access Taupo committee, so we just acknowledge that.
We just, well, I don't know what the right word is a reference that Colin Coburn, 12 Narahoe, long time, 50-year resident, passed away suddenly, and myself, Councillor Williamson, I'm not so sure if anyone else was at the funeral. Yeah. Were you there, John? John, were you there? No. Yeah, okay. So you would always recognise him. He was the mainstay of the mobility group, and great guy, huge supporter of council and the whole district as a whole. Yeah, Colin, yeah. Amazing guy, wine club, he covered the whole field. Yeah, he covered the whole field, so I should have acknowledged that at the start. But thank you, Councillor Williams, for raising that. But we're just like that minute. Yeah, pleased that we, acknowledge the passing of his, although it's acknowledged, what's the correct word, Jamie? Recognise the passing. All right, any other members' reports? No? Okay, the council receives the members' reports, so move things. Councillor Truman, seconded by Councillor Kangi. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried.